I mean, you're totally correct. I'm speaking at the conceptual level of the kind of approaches we have to promote. I mean, I could just resign from my position if everything would be perfect. And in fact, what you say is very true. We have to look at the vulnerabilities, and always when we are looking at these situations, we have to start out with an analysis of the vulnerabilities. And it will turn out that those who already are weak. But it doesn't mean that they have lesser rights. They also need to be educated about their rights, to know their rights. This is empowering them.
And Njoro Njaye is going to address us all in a minute, but first she wants to ask a specific question of Walter Kälin.
Yes, I would like just to tell to Walter, but what happened when, you know, one country receives some people coming from another country in distress, and they are not there on a temporary basis most of the times, you know. They come for definite settlements. And what happened at the international level in terms of cooperation between the two countries? This is the point. And when we think that, when we say that there is normative gaps in taking care on the protection of these kind of people and protection and assistance to them, I think about those who move within their own borders, but also those who move cross-border. This morning, the president of Kiribati talked about how to resettle, how to have a formal plan, an adequate plan that can allow them to resettle their people and with dignity and safe and sovereignty, recover their sovereignty somewhere. But this is not a temporary movement. It's a definite one. It is a labor migration, regular labor migration scheme, but it is a definite move, I mean, a permanent move. How can you do with that?
No, as I said, I think we do have, at a normative level, an appropriate framework for the internally displaced. We just have to implement it. We have to work on that to implement it, to really integrate it into domestic laws and policies. When it comes to cross-border, as I said, we have the gaps. Because there we have the special problem of whole states moving, but in quantitative terms this will not be the majority of cases. We have the mixed flows, people who have to move, those who move in terms, within the framework of labor migration. But I think that's the task of your organization, the International Organization for Migration.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a question to ask of Mr.
No, I just wanted to, my name is Milun Kothari. I was the former Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing with the UN Human Rights Council. I just had a response and a question to Walter, but a response to the person who asked the previous question, that the people who are going to be displaced from climate change will be poor rural people. I think I would argue, and there's enough evidence to show that it's also going to be a lot of poor urban people. You have 1 billion people living in inadequate, insecure housing. Many of them are living on flood sites in disaster-prone areas, and they're going to be displaced. And these people, precisely what you said, do not have even the rights that refugees have. So we are dealing with an old problem that is going to exacerbate itself. Many of the people who are going to be displaced because of climate change, even from the coastlines and so on, will move into urbanization. You're going to have an increased problem of slums and people living in very poor conditions. So I agree with Walter that what we need are interpretive instruments like the IDP guidelines. There are also global guidelines on evictions and displacement. And we need to convince governments that what they have to do in terms of adaptation measures are consistent with their ongoing existing obligations to international human rights law. So I think the question to Walter was more on, you said we need to implement these. If you could elaborate a bit more on how to implement them. Thank you.
I mean, the first step, and we're talking about the internally displaced, is to acknowledge that in terms of rights, these people have the same rights, and not just to give in to the realities. We are speaking here about norms, about the ought, and not what about is. And then second is to convince governments not just to agree on a rhetorical level, but really adapt all their laws, strategies, policies to ensure that these people who are weak, vulnerable, can in fact enjoy all these rights. And this will be part of adaptation measures. Adaptation is not only about building, I think adaptation is also about creating an appropriate legal framework at the domestic level. And to me this is more important than, let's say, create a new international convention, because it's at that level where it will have the impact. And it can be done. We don't have at the normative level the big gaps. We can do it. We have the gaps when it comes to cross-border movements. That's very clear.
Thank you very much, Walter. I don't know if you're going to sneak off soon. From all of us, let's say a big round of applause for Walter. Thank you very much for your participation. Stay with us for as long as you can, please. I'm going to now ask Njoro, Deputy Director General of the IOM, to broaden it out to discuss the wider issue of climate migrants.
Yeah. We have, thank you so much, Nidina. We have a lot of issues to raise here on migration, because when we look at the Kyoto Protocol as well as the IPCC report and even the Bali roadmap, we have seen anywhere migration issues, and in particular regular and legal migration. And from our side in the IOM, we are absolutely clear about the fact that migration certainly is driven by environmental change, climate change, desertification, and so on and so forth. But migration itself can be, if it is properly managed, can be an adaptation strategy by itself. How? When some group of people move because of natural disaster and go somewhere to adapt themselves to the new environment, we think that this need to be understood as an attempt by those population and their government to reframe the way that these people have to live. And this is a strategy of adaptation is one of these concerns. How can we make the environment where people live so friendly that the people can be at ease when they choose to live somewhere? The second point I would like to raise is that we used to see where people live, for example, in a camp, that around the camp, all the environment is absolutely devastated, be it the tree for the food and so on, being fruit or vegetable they used to utilize for their normal life. And in my country, when these resources are, they come to disappear, the group move anywhere else. And where they move, they do the same thing. And when they leave one part of the country to another one, these have a consequence on the climate change. And it is why we think that seeing the both parts of the problem on migration issues is something absolutely critical for the national adaptation plan that the countries have to adopt. And this is missing in the document. The second thing we would like to notice with you is also that there is this normative gap, and I come back to that. I know that our friend Walter talked about the UN, the IDP's convention or guideline that exists already, but nobody have heard about that, and I'm not so sure that one single country is implementing that convention.